In the years after the Civil War, the American frontier was a land of opportunity and danger. Settlers, drifters, homesteaders, and hopeful fortune seekers moved westward along the Osage Trail in Kansas, searching for new lives and fresh beginnings. The land was vast and untamed, the prairies stretching endlessly, dotted with lonely cabins and roadside inns that promised food, shelter, and a brief respite from the hardships of travel. But on the frontier, appearances were often deceiving, and behind the promise of hospitality could lurk something sinister. It was in this harsh yet hopeful landscape that the Bender family arrived in the early 1870s. To weary travelers, the Benders appeared like many immigrant families of the time. German settlers who built a modest inn and small grocery to serve those passing through. Yet neighbors would later whisper that there was something unsettling about them. The father, John Pa Bender, spoke little English and carried an air of menace. Elvira, the matriarch, was sharp-tempered and quick to anger. Their son, John Jr., was awkward, with a laugh that chilled those who heard it. And then there was Kate, the young, attractive daughter who presented herself as a spiritualist and healer, advertising her psychic abilities to lure guests. The Benders offered food and shelter to the road-weary, but therein soon gained a reputation as the last stop many travelers ever made. What began as a small family business would evolve into one of the most horrifying true crime stories of the 19th century, a tale of greed, deception, and blood buried in the Kansas prairie. The Bender family appeared, at first glance, to be just another group of immigrant settlers trying to carve out a living on the Kansas frontier. They arrived in Labette County around 1870, claiming a parcel of land and setting up a one-room cabin that doubled as both a home and an inn for travelers along the busy Osage Trail. Yet while their establishment promised food, lodging, and supplies, those who met the Benders often felt uneasy, sensing that something was not quite right about this family of four. The patriarch, John Pa Bender, was a hulking, silent figure who spoke little English and was known to glare rather than converse. His wife, Elvira, often called Ma, was equally unwelcoming, her temper foul and her demeanor cold. Neighbors described her as surly and prone to angry outbursts, with whispers that she dabbled in strange superstitions. Their son, John Jr., stood out in a different way. Thin and awkward, he was known for his eerie, inappropriate laughter, often bursting into giggles at moments when no one else saw humor. This unnerved visitors and locals alike, fueling rumors that the boy was not quite right in the head. And then there was Kate, the daughter, who seemed the most approachable of the clan. Young, attractive, and charismatic, she advertised herself as a psychic and healer, claiming she could cure illnesses or summon the spirits of the dead. Her charm and beauty drew in customers, particularly men traveling alone with money in their pockets. Kate's mysterious seances and magnetic healing became a lure that would later prove deadly. Together, the Benders projected an image of hard-working settlers, but beneath the surface lay a family bound not by hospitality or faith, but by violence and greed. The Bender homestead was more than a family cabin. It was a carefully crafted snare for the unsuspecting. The modest structure sat isolated along the Osage Trail, welcoming travelers with the promise of hot meals, supplies, and spiritual guidance. To weary wanderers, the little inn seemed like a blessing, but hidden within its walls was a design of calculated cruelty. The single-room cabin was divided by a heavy canvas curtain. In the front, guests were greeted, fed, and entertained. In the back, behind the curtain, the family plotted their grim work. Travelers who dined at the Bender table were often seated in a particular chair, the place of honor near the dividing curtain. It was here that Kate charmed guests with her wit and mysticism, distracting them from the subtle movements around them. As the victim leaned forward in conversation, one of the benders would silently position themselves behind the curtain. Then came the sudden, brutal strike, a hammer crashing down on the back of the skull. The blow stunned or killed instantly, and before the victim could even cry out, their throat was cut to ensure silence. The body, now lifeless, was dragged to a trapdoor beneath the table. Blood seeped into the dirt floor below as the family lowered their victim into the cellar, hidden from any prying eyes. Later, under cover of night, the corpse would be carried outside and buried in the orchard, the soil gradually filling with the remains of lost travelers. What seemed to be a humble frontier was, in truth, a slaughterhouse disguised as hospitality. The Benders had turned their home into a factory of death, one meal and one victim at a time. As the years passed, whispers began to spread along the Osage Trail. Travelers vanished without a trace. Lone men seeking land, families heading westward, even merchants carrying money or goods. At first, such disappearances were not unusual. The frontier was dangerous, with bandits, accidents, and the sheer harshness of the wilderness claiming countless lives. But in Labette County, the pattern grew too strong to ignore. Time and again, those last seen passing near the Bender homestead were never heard from again. Neighbors occasionally remarked on how wealthy travelers seemed drawn to Kate Bender, who offered seances and healing sessions. Men who confided in her about their plans or wealth often ended their journeys at the Bender Inn. Some locals grew suspicious when valuable horses, wagons, or supplies turned up abandoned along the trail, yet the owners never returned to claim them. The Benders always had an explanation, a shrug, or a claim that the travelers had simply moved on. Families of the missing began pressing for answers. Letters were sent, inquiries made, but the vast frontier left few witnesses. It was only when Dr. William York, a respected physician and Civil War veteran, disappeared in 1873 after visiting the Benders that alarm turned into outrage. York's prominent brothers, one a Kansas senator and the other a powerful colonel, vowed to find him, and with their influence, search parties were formed. The trail of vanishings had gone unchecked for too long, but now the eyes of the community turned toward the Benders. What had once been quiet suspicion hardened into fear and dread. The inn that had promised safety and rest was beginning to look like a place where travelers went in, but never came out. By the spring of 1873, tension in Labette County had reached its breaking point. The disappearance of Dr. William York could not be brushed aside like the countless nameless travelers before him. His brothers, Colonel Ed York and Senator Alexander York, wielded both authority and influence, and they pressed for answers with a determination the frontier had rarely seen. The community rallied, search parties rode out, and suspicion fell squarely on the Bender family. When a group of locals approached the Bender in to question them, the place stood eerily silent. The family, who had lived there for years, was gone. Their wagon, animals, and possessions were missing, as though they had fled in the dead of night. At first, the cabin appeared deserted, but as searchers looked closer, disturbing signs emerged. Inside, the air reeked of decay. Beneath a trapdoor in the floor, the dirt was soaked with old blood, dark stains that no amount of cleaning could disguise. Word spread quickly, and more men arrived to dig. They began turning over the soil in the Bender orchard, a place once filled with trees and promise. What they unearthed was horror made flesh. Body after body was pulled from shallow graves. Men, women, even children. At least 11 victims were recovered, though rumors insisted there were more still hidden beneath the prairie earth. Dr. York was among the dead, his skull crushed, throat slashed, murdered like so many others who had unknowingly accepted the Benders' hospitality. The grim orchard became known as a garden of horrors, and the news shocked the nation. What had masqueraded as a safe haven for weary travelers was revealed to be a killing ground, and the Bender family, once just unsettling neighbors, were now branded as monsters. The discovery of the Benders' crimes ignited a frenzy across Kansas and beyond. Newspapers branded them the Bloody Benders, and their flight into the wilderness sparked one of the largest manhunts the frontier had ever seen. Posses scoured the countryside, tracking wagon ruts and questioning anyone who might have seen the family. But the Benders seemed to have vanished into the vast American landscape, leaving only blood and rumor behind. Theories multiplied. Some claimed the family split up to avoid detection, scattering across states and territories. Others whispered that vigilantes caught them and delivered swift frontier justice, lynching them in secret, their bodies hidden to avoid legal repercussions. From Texas to the Dakotas, reports surfaced of people swearing they had seen Kate Bender or her parents under new names, blending into immigrant communities where no one knew their past. Yet each lead fizzled into uncertainty. Rewards were offered, arrests made, and suspects paraded before hopeful crowds, but none could ever be proven beyond doubt. The lack of definitive evidence allowed the legend of the Benders to grow. To some, they remained fugitives, always one step ahead of the law. To others, they had already paid with their lives, dangling from a tree in some forgotten corner of the prairie. What was undeniable was the terror they left behind. Families traveling west now looked at every roadside inn with suspicion, every friendly host with unease. The Benders had exposed the darkest truth of the frontier. That danger was not only in the wilderness, but in the very people who offered a helping hand. Their ultimate fate remains a mystery, a chilling reminder that some killers vanish as completely as the lives they take. The tale of the Bloody Benders left a scar on the American psyche that never truly healed. Their crimes were not just murders. They were a betrayal of one of the few comforts travelers trusted on the frontier, the open door of a family home. In a land already plagued by bandits, harsh weather, and hunger, the Benders embodied a new kind of terror, killers hiding behind the mask of hospitality. The discovery of their Garden of Horrors in 1873 shocked the nation, and newspapers carried lurid headlines from coast to coast. For many Americans, the story of the Benders was their first glimpse of organized serial murder on home soil. The family became infamous, their names whispered with the same dread as Jack the Ripper years later in London. Folklore flourished around them, painting Kate as a seductive witch, Ma as a snarling crone, and Pa and John Jr. as brutish executioners. Over time, their legend blurred fact and fiction. Some claimed dozens more victims lay undiscovered in the Kansas prairie. Others turned them into boogeymen of campfire stories, cautioning travelers about trusting strangers. Even today, Labette County remembers. Historical markers and museum exhibits keep their story alive, though the cabin itself has long vanished into the soil. The Benders' legacy is not just their killings, but the unease they left behind. They showed how evil could flourish quietly, hiding in plain sight, and how the search for wealth and survival on the frontier could breed monsters. Their fate may never be known, but their story endures as one of the darkest chapters in American history. Proof that sometimes the most dangerous wilderness lies not outside the door, but within it.